Last week, we took the opportunity to discuss and herald the demise of the third-party cookie and hear from Google themselves, as well as some of our leading experts within the Pimento network. This week, we're going to build on that. Obviously, a number of you have written to us and have said that this is all very complicated and both worrying and equally opportunistically a time for us to reassess our marketing. We had over 140 people on last week's call, and interestingly, we've had over 200 views on the catch-up channel already. So it's obviously something that's on people's minds. Today, hopefully, we're going to come up with some simple solutions, or at least show you the way forward, what we can practically do about it and how we can take advantage of this change, both for our agency brands, but also for our clients. There's really two key things to take out of today's session is that actually, by building more transparent relationships using data with our customers, we can produce both better and more personalized communications, which can only, over time, hope to improve our relationship with our customers. So, it's not all doom and gloom, and like any change, everyone's already fearful of the implications, but today, hopefully, we'll actually give you some answers. This morning, we're going to hear from Claire Feeney, who's at OneTrust PreferenceChoice. She's joined us at 6 o'clock in the morning from her office or her bedroom, wherever she is in the world in the United States. So thank you for getting out of bed early. We do really appreciate you joining us today. She's part of the world's most commonly used privacy, security, and marketing technology platform. And for those that don't know, OneTrust consent and preference management products. And she's worked with marketeers to centralize their user consent and preference management and comply with the thousands of global data privacy regulations, including our dear friend GDPR. And so she's well versed in the world. She understands this particular topic, and more importantly, they have a solution that they're going to share with us today. She holds a bachelor's degree in business from the University of Georgia. During the open question session at the end, Claire will be joined by Caroline Edgerton, who is based in good old Blighty, so she's here in the UK. She's a data privacy consultant, and she runs her own business, Edgerton Consulting, and specializes in helping businesses with their data privacy programs. She's qualified as a certified information privacy professional, as well as being an information privacy manager. And she's also a OneTrust Fellow of Privacy Technology. Egerton Consulting is a OneTrust business partner, so they are a solutions provider, as well as consulting in her own business. She uses this technology as part of the solution. Prior to specializing in privacy, Caroline spent 35 years walking the talk as a global project manager and global privacy champion for CPM, which is an outsourced sales agency, which is part of the Omnicom group. So she has stacks of relevant experience. If you'd like more information on the OneTrust platform after today's talk, just drop me a line and I'll put you in contact with them. They've been kind enough to extend an offer to Pimento members with a discount code, which I can give you. So that's what we're going to be covering today. A few words about next week whilst I can. We're having the week off next week, adjusting to rural life in the Cotswolds. We're moving tomorrow, or rather Pimento's moving tomorrow, but we'll be back on the 1st of July with our monthly 5 p.m. club, i.e. Thursday week, and that's going to be hosted by the Behaviours Agency. Many of you, I think I know the Behaviours Agency, that they're a creative agency, that their heart uses behavioural science to make marketing more effective. So it should be a really good session from them and a really good opportunity for you to meet other members of the network. As before, it's open to all Pimento members and selected guests. If you're a guest and you think you find that interesting to meet other members of the network, or you're interested in joining Pimento, please drop Isabel a line. She'll put her email address in the chat box, and then we can get you an invite. So the next midweek session will be on July the 7th, and it will be the turn of the Pimento Business Development Club, which is hosted by Paddy, our head of business development, and this time he'll be grilling Katie Street from the Street Consultancy. She'll be in the hot seat, who many of you will know. So I'm going to hand over now to Claire, and she's going to share the screen. She's got a few slides to take you through, and then we're very happy to take questions and make this as interactive as possible as we go through it. So please do use the chat box, wave your hands vigorously, jump up and down, and smile. But Claire, thank you for joining us. And somebody at 6 o'clock in the morning over there, you're looking remarkably well.
Well, thank you for saying that, and thank you, Stephen, for having me this morning. I think this is a great continuation of the session that you guys had last week with Google, talking about what the end of third-party cookies means and looking a little bit about a strategy to replace that data source of third-party cookies that I'm pretty passionate about. When you combine it with your privacy strategy, can really be a win-win for brands, for marketers, for advertisers, as well as our customers, by adding that transparency and trust into the process. My slides going here. So as Stephen said, I'm a product marketing manager at OneTrust PreferenceChoice, and I've been in enterprise software for about 10 years now. And at OneTrust, it's I kind of get to work actually with marketers instead of more IT security folks that I've worked with for the majority of my career. So it's really exciting to me. And like I said, I'm pretty passionate about the opportunity that's here for marketers. If we can shift our thinking a little bit from a have to for compliance sake, or have to because these other factors are coming into play in the ad tech ecosystem, and really look at it as an opportunity. I can think it's a big win-win for brands, for advertisers, and for their audiences. So I'm going to go through a little bit today of what is first-party data and of how we define the different data types that are out there. What's really driving the shift to first-party data? I know you guys talked a lot about that last week. So I'll briefly talk about that and really focus on some of the use cases, benefits of first-party data, how you can actually get started, what it looks like. It can seem a little bit intimidating, or if it's a new terminology or a new strategy you're introducing, but you can start simple. And then I'll talk a little bit about how OneTrust can help. So just to introduce OneTrust, our company, our goal is to help our customers make trust a competitive advantage with their prospects and with their customers. And really what my product is focused on is really implementing those transparent user experiences that are going to allow you to build trust with your audience. The slide is actually already out of date. We're at 10,000 customers now. That's on me and the marketing team, but it's hard to keep this one updated. We're a global company. We're co-headquartered between London and Atlanta, hence the early morning for me and some of the late nights for our team in London. And really, when I like to think of it as, you can't really build trust in silos. So we all know, and I'm sure Caroline, who's on to answer questions later, can attest to this. You can't really build trust in just one area of your business. There shouldn't be just one team that's kind of in charge of this. It really takes an effort from your entire organization, from your internal, maybe HR teams, making sure you're earning trust from your internal stakeholders, making sure you're working with the right vendors and assessing risk appropriately with any third parties, any processors that you're working with. And of course, where my favorite to focus on is what are the tools we're using to really be transparent with our audience about what we're doing with their data, help educate them about what we're doing to protect their data and maybe what their rights are as data subjects or consumers sharing data with our company, and how we make sure that we have kind of a clear value exchange when we're asking for that data, so that we can continue to personalize things for our audience and that they understand what we're using their data for. All right, so let's jump in and talk about what exactly is first-party data. So I'm actually going to start at the bottom with third-party data. I think we're all pretty familiar with this, aggregate from different sources. When we talk about third-party cookies, we're talking about information that comes from activity outside of our domain that we can leverage to kind of track activity, personalize things. There's a lesser known term, and it doesn't come up too often with marketers that I talk to, but second-party data. So really somebody else's first-party data. So a partner you're working with, potentially a vendor, we can consider this second-party data. And then where it gets interesting, when we talk about first-party data, this is all data that's coming directly from our audience, directly from consumers. There's a slight difference, and this was coined by the analyst from Forrester recently, between zero-party data and first-party data. A little bit of an important distinction. When we talk about first-party data, that's the most common term that I'm seeing, all data that's coming directly from consumers. The slight difference is that zero-party data is defined as proactively and freely given, and not tied necessarily to supporting a transaction or as a requirement for services delivered. So truly freely given, truly data that's shared from your audience that's not necessarily to support any kind of transaction with your organization or to take advantage of any kind of offer, asset, download, what have you. I think we know, I love this quote that, just kind of sums it up very nicely because, as we move away from third-party cookies and of course, different solutions kind of pop up to solve that, that kind of vacancy with a data source that we have, there's definitely going to be replacements. I think it's a matter of how expensive that becomes and how realistic that becomes for a lot of smaller organizations or those without the resources. And in the spirit of third-party cookies going away, some of those tools that are replacing them seem eerily similar to the tracking that's used by third-party cookies. So obviously the data that we're going to get directly from customers, the zero-party data, the first-party data, is going to be really valuable, not only because it can be more cost-effective, but also can be much more reliable. And then there's, the creepiness factor. If I know that I shared certain things about myself with a brand, it's not necessarily based on my tracking activity. It's based on data that I've shared, which makes it a little more transparent and a little more comforting to audiences. And just to give you an idea of who our customers are, your customers are that are really thinking about this, 88% of marketers are saying that collecting first-party data is a 2021 priority. This is a huge jump that we've seen in previous years, and just the conversations that I'm having with our customers, it's becoming much more of a common thought process when you think about what you need to do, what you have to do from a consent, consent management, policy and notice management, all of your privacy management that you have. It's becoming much more common to have first-party data as an MVP in our deployment conversations with customers. Much more common. People are asking about this and how our tools support this much earlier on in the conversation, which is a great sign to see people talking about it. We've been talking about it for a while, but it's great to see this is becoming more of a priority for marketers as kind of our deadline to third-party cookies going away in 2022 approaches. So how do you shift to first-party data, and why is this such a big deal for marketers? So obviously we have the different privacy regulations that are coming in with things like the GDPR in the States, CCPA and CPRA. Brazil has LGPD. It's a little early for me to rattle off all of the acronyms that go into all the worldwide privacy regulations. But there's also the frameworks and guidelines, and obviously technology changes. iOS 14 introduced new restrictions around tracking activity between different applications, similar to third-party cookies with browsers. So what that brings is basically more control and privacy rights for consumers, so good for us as consumers. But for brands, for advertisers, there's obviously that kind of more limited data that we have, more limited data that we're capturing when it comes to browsing activities, which is going to make it harder for any marketing, retargeting, ad targeting, personalization based on certain activities. But what's really driving all of this is that, and where the big opportunity is for marketers, is that our consumer expectations have changed. So it's kind of like a cycle of, there are certain consumers that are very aware of their data privacy, we're passing laws to protect them. As we pass laws and get more coverage, more people become aware of this. We see companies like Apple really kind of leading the charge of promoting themselves as a kind of privacy-first company. If you've seen any of the new iPhone adverts, they're basically just privacy, that's iPhone. They're doing a great job with that and have some great PR around all that they're doing when it comes to privacy to meet consumer expectations. And so that's really where the opportunity lies to be transparent when we're collecting data and implement kind of more education, transparency, less creepiness, if you want to get less of a technical terminology for our audience. So I think we're all pretty familiar with how kind of third-party cookies work. You visit a website. One thing I do want to point out is that you should obviously be still collecting, signaling consent, even when third-party cookies go away. There are still, first-party cookies, other cookies you're going to be leveraging on your site that you need consent for. So this does not mean that any kind of cookie banners go away on your site. But obviously, what we do need to worry about now, and what's a little bit newer, maybe not for everyone that's already complying with the GDPR, but making sure that we're being transparent, disclosing the right information, making it clear who's allowed to receive any of the data collected or who we're sharing that with. And of course, do I have consent to leverage any of the data that I am collecting on my website? So what does this actually look like in practice? Obviously, first-party data, we see the value of it replacing some of the third-party data sources we have. But really what this is going to allow us to do when we're collecting this directly from our audience, we're directly engaging with them. We can capture things like communication preferences, intents, interests from customers where we already interact with them. So web forms that we use for asset downloads on our site or to register for webinars like this one. We can also do some more things with kind of just-in-time consent or contextual data capture. And we'll take a look at a couple of simple examples of how to get started with that in a second. What this really allows us to do when we're directly engaging our consumers is really increase the transparency that we have around data collection. So we're no longer just kind of dropping cookies, having this whole behind the scenes kind of ad tech ecosystem that to be honest, I wasn't really aware about before I got into the privacy space and came to OneTrust and really started digging into how exactly that operates. So our average consumer is not going to be aware of that. And, as we become more sensitive to how our data is being shared, we might not like that we kind of see advertisements that follow us just based on activity. So basically, when we are collecting data directly from our audience, we can provide all the information around how we protect data, how we use the data, how we make the experience better for our customers by collecting that data to personalize things, tailor products and services. Finally, and this is, I love this and thinking about this kind of first and foremost when we're thinking about our strategy in general around user experience, how we want to be maybe privacy first, but customer centric. We really want to give our audience the power for choice over things like communication preferences, providing personal data, give them that choice of what data to share and when is really important and to help build trust with your audience. On the other hand, for ourselves as marketers, advertisers, the customers that you're working with, it's a great way to improve the insight that you have to your customers. So I know as a marketer, there are always maybe seemingly random questions that I would have, or things where I'm like, if someone lands on this page of my website, I would love to ask them, X, Y, Z, or understand this about their interest level or intentions, or what maybe they are still confused about. having that contextual kind of data capture is a great way to improve the insight you have to your customers. It's also a great way, and we'll take a good look at an example I love about first party data with the New York Times a little bit, and just a little bit too, but a new way to segment your audience. So potentially based on some of the answers that you get to some of the questions that you're asking, might show you new patterns in your audience, might inform your campaign strategy in new ways based on that new kind of way to segment your audience and divide them up in different ways. And with that, you can personalize your content, products, and services that are going to be the most relevant. So often, most common example, we collect data from our website. We, turn those subscriptions, that information that we collect, whether it's email addresses, maybe a little bit of interests, turn that into our kind of email marketing campaign. And we see that when we personalize emails or segment our audience and tailor emails, even in a very small way, with a couple different segments to send a similar campaign email, the open rates goes up in the double digits, the click-through rates and the conversion rates go up in the double digits. Those numbers are huge for open rates for emails and email campaigns. So we're talking real impact when we can personalize in new ways. And, there's kind of a first mover advantage here. There aren't a lot of brands that are doing this today and taking advantage of first party data and thinking about, this as their kind of first and foremost strategy when it comes to reaching their audience versus some of the advertising that's done with third-party cookies today. So a great opportunity for marketers and for advertisers there. Last, but certainly not least, we want to make sure that we are activating that data. So making sure that we share any data that we're collecting with different systems in our organization. So I mentioned email systems. We want to make sure we also have this information available in CRM systems, any kind of tools that we're leveraging and that we're sharing with our team so that we are kind of consistently honoring those choices that our customers are making and kind of incorporating the information that they're sharing with us into all of their interactions with our brand. So I mentioned this as a great example. So I love this example for a couple of reasons. One, because it just highlights the shift away from third-party cookies, going to first-party data, but it also, I think the New York Times has done a great job of being transparent with their audience and really explaining what this means for them and really has promoted themselves as a brand that cares about privacy, that is at the forefront of thinking when it comes to kind of tracking technologies going away. So they announced last year they were completely doing away with their reliance on third-party cookies, which is a big deal because as a publisher, that's a huge part of your business model, right? So they started with, I believe it was 43 different segments based on both demographic data that they knew about their audience and preferences that they had collected, first-party data that they had collected to basically fill their ad inventory. They had plans to expand that number of 43 segments and double it within the first year of this program. But I also think they did a great job of, actually promoting this news, sharing this news, being transparent with their audience, and making a big deal out of this announcement. So a great way to kind of combine the change in strategy, but also, being transparent with your audience, educating them, explaining the value that's there for them when it comes to this kind of switch, this kind of movement away from a third-party data source and relying on first-party data. What does this actually look like in practice? It can seem a little intimidating. Like, what do you actually collect as far as first-party data? Maybe a question doesn't come to mind, or a piece of data that you would necessarily want to know comes to mind right away. But first-party data is really, it's any data that we get from our audience that can help inform, our campaigns, our decisions around where we put marketing resources and investments. So it can be as simple as, in context, we have an article, or we have a product page, we have something on our website that says, hey, did you enjoy this? Do you want more content like this? Sign up. And then we collect an email address, maybe a first name, maybe we progressively profile from there. But this is really where it starts. And I like to point this out, that it can be this simple. Obviously, we want to make sure that we are combining this data capture with all the proper privacy that we need in place. So the proper consent, the proper, policy, notice, whatever's required based on, the geography and where you're located, where your customers are located, and that type of thing. So I'm sure for any questions you have about that, it's great to have Caroline on the line too, to talk about that and how do we bringing it all together. But it can be pretty simple and easy to start. And like I said, you might start with just email address, first name. You might also include some communication preferences about frequency, the topics that you're using, or that you have available to subscribe to different email communications or opt into that, consent to that marketing activity. What's great about this, and I'll mention this as well, when you're empowering your customers with these choices, like we talked about, there's also a positive trend in reducing the number of complete unsubscribes or opt-outs by using more of what we call an opt-down strategy. So having more options available when it comes to frequency, when it comes to topic, is great for having those opt-down features. You can also, this is another example for publishers, having more, does this content appeal to you, capturing that in context with specific data capture. And then we want to really make sure that we are activating this data. So first and foremost, of course, we want to remain compliant. We want to have the proper consent receipts and compliance records that we need when we opt in, when we subscribe. Collecting consent preferences and first-party data together, leveraging technology or a tool that's going to let us not only capture the data, not only look at specific activity when it comes to email marketing or with activities that our CRM supports, making sure we have that data kind of deduped, build those customer profiles that we can progressively profile, and then make sure we're informing our decisions around campaign, country, user, looking at our opt-in rates, historical trends that we can get from the consent rates that we have, and work on improving those consent rates, improving those opt-ins with these tools that are supported, making sure we're compliant, we have the right consent and all of that. And then of course, making sure that we are leveraging this information that we're collecting in our CRM, marketing automation, all of our other platforms that we leverage to interact with our audience, for our marketing team, our sales team, even support and customer success. We should keep that in mind as well. So when it comes to obviously trust, transparency, I've mentioned being transparent, being educational, explaining a value exchange to your audience. But of course, all of this goes into building trust with your audience, making sure that we have an audience who's willing to volunteer their information with us. So being transparent, focusing on building that trust, in addition to just complying with the different privacy laws and frameworks that we're required to do, is more and more important. So immediate steps for success, it can be starting small. I think that, bringing together the process of maybe, consent that you're capturing just for, email and an email tool, or maybe just in a couple forms on your website. When you bring it together and make sure that you have consent, first-party data capture, privacy compliance, kind of all together in a single strategy, single place, it's going to be really helpful. But starting small, looking at customer journeys, where you can provide more control, where you can empower your audience, making sure that you are focused on those KPIs like opt-in rates, the unsubscribe rates to your emails, things like that, with a focus on trust. So we can look at those KPIs and measure those when we implement these transparent strategies, and make sure we're trending in the right direction. And I definitely recommend doing some A/B testing, and using a tool like OneTrust. It's a great way to do that, making sure you're getting the proper consent and records and receipts, and that you're having the most success driving those opt-ins as possible. And of course, we want to make sure that we are syncing all of this information, the consent that we're capturing, the consent signals, not only internally where we need to in different systems in our MarTech stack, making sure we're sharing that with any vendors that we're working with appropriately, of course, and in compliance rules and all of that. But making sure that if we are taking this information, we're really setting an expectation for our audience. We want to make sure that we're honoring that and honoring their choices in what we do with them moving forward. So I wanted to touch a little bit on how OneTrust can help before we move into our Q&A. So basically, OneTrust helps be the bridge between privacy and marketing. So different regulations, of course, we want to make sure we're compliant with the GDPR, all of our global regulations, looking at making sure that we are being compliant when we're leveraging cookies, not only third-party cookies today, but when those go away, we still have first-party cookies. We still have cookies that are necessary for our websites to function, that we will still need to get consent and still inform our users. Making sure we're getting the proper consent for marketing activities, and that we have the tools in place to support terms and conditions, policy and notice, and all of that for our users. But on the other hand, being more strategic versus the have to for privacy compliance, making sure that we are combining that with know your customer strategies, our first party data collection that's so important when we think about replacing third-party cookies, making sure we have a way that's going to integrate our systems, make sure we're activating this data, being able to personalize experience, improve that trust and loyalty is really key for marketers going forward. And as I mentioned, the OneTrust platform, helps our customers not only know what data they have, know what laws apply, and then provide a tool set for different areas of your organization that should all be involved in privacy, security, data production, data governance. And we talked a little bit today about one small aspect of looking at first-party data as a replacement for some of the third-party data sources that are lost. But there's a lot that goes into it when it comes to consent, the data mapping in your organization. And so excited to answer any questions or dive into anything else the audience is curious about.
Thank you very, very much indeed. A lot of information there. We will share those slides with everyone after today's call. I had a few questions coming, if I may, and I'll pull them out. Caroline, you can also see some of those questions too down on the chat side. Let's start with Guy McConnell from Bern. Guy, are you on the call? And if so, could you raise your hand?
Yes, I'm here, Stephen.
Super. Yeah, you had a question for Claire.
Yes, yeah. So I actually had two questions for you, Claire. One is, do you have any tips on how to de-anonymize customers and encourage them to provide their data in situations where there isn't a transaction?
Yeah, absolutely. So when there's not a transaction, there can be different things for, obviously I think we all are familiar with, provide your email, get 10% off. If they're extra generous, 15% off. But when there's not a transaction, it can be a little bit more difficult. But I think what's nice is we're seeing more creative kind of things. People, I think, like to talk about themselves. So if you have, this is maybe a niche like B2C see example. But if you have like a fun quiz about, this is just an example I saw the other day, about like skincare concerns, or something that you're interested in, or maybe even something that's not, that you wouldn't think is directly related to the brand that you're talking to. But something like that, that's like a fun quiz, a fun survey, and maybe delivers, a certain, fun result for your audience, is a great way to capture information that might not be even tied to, a known user or in support of a transaction. So I think just making it fun and thinking about what your consumers would have a good time maybe answering or interacting with. And then of course, explaining either, the value exchange of, this helps inform, our product direction, or this helps us know our audience a little bit better, making it clear that we're not, everything's, maybe the data is all anonymized and things like that, making sure that we kind of go back to that transparency, education, value exchange whenever we're collecting information. But it can be fun. It doesn't have to be totally related to the product or what you are.
I had a follow-up question to that. Well, that's not really a follow-up, it's a second question actually, which was also, do you think, what's your view on personalization and whether or not it can be overused?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a fine line when we look at personalization, kind of the creepiness factor of personalizing certain things. So we definitely want to keep in mind, I think it's going to vary a little bit between, of course, B2B and B2C, what kind of industry we're in and what kind of audience we have. Certain brands are going to rely more on personalization, a convenience factor, as really the value that they're delivering to their audience. And for others, it might not be as desired or first and foremost. So there is definitely a fine line. I think when we look at things like, and I touched on this a little bit, third-party data sources, like the third-party data sources, third-party cookies going away, that's kind of shrouded in a lot of mystery. I don't think a lot of people today really understand how retargeting works, or what they're really consenting to, if they've consented to tracking cookies and things like that. So making sure that we have, an understanding and an explanation when we're collecting first-party data, I think will help a lot with that kind of creepiness factor that you may have when you see a personalized ad that's obviously retargeting, supported by third-party cookies today. When you see that explanation of, this is what we do with your data, this is how we personalize your experience, I think there's going to be more understanding from our audiences about exactly how that data is used and exactly what they can expect when they share certain things. So as long as we're consistent with kind of what we're promising and what we're delivering, I think we're in a better place when it comes to that kind of extra personalized, extra creepy, extra mysterious, how do you know this about me, type of experience. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Claire.
We've got another question here. This time it's from Steph Elliott. Steph, are you on the call somewhere? Let me see if I can find you. Yeah, Steph.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. Sorry, just a quick question in terms of the break between first-party data as being data that's given freely and I suppose data that's observed. And so you use the example of email. You give your email to receive an email newsletter. but then that's utilized for linking you to a Facebook custom audience. Now, that's coming down to, is that on the basis of consent, legitimate interest? And a lot of the, I think it was one of your slides which showed your tech stack with all the different data providers, effectively relies on linking this data, a match mechanism of matching across different data points. And as a consumer, do consumers really, are they aware of that? If they are aware of it, can they really consent to it? And I suppose my question was about the TCF framework, where if you look at that, it's got 12 purposes, but the feature of linking across is classed as a feature. So you can't actually consent to that as a consumer.
As a purpose, yeah. I mean, I think you bring up a great point. I would love Caroline to jump in here and give her opinion on this and kind of the data mapping and stuff. She's definitely an expert there. I think for consumers, that's kind of still a question that a lot of people have. How much are they actually aware of? How do we get the proper consent if we are maybe sharing an email address to these different walled gardens that we have, and relying on that identity for a lot of our marketing activity. But Caroline, do you want to jump in here and talk a little bit about GDPR, TCF, and how you view this?
Well, I guess the thing I think stands above everything, and GDPR is about understanding what you do with data in your business. And it's a tough gig, isn't it? It's being able to map out exactly how data is flowing between systems, and everything you do, you need to be able to evidence that you understand how that is flowing. Be clear with the consumers, and then only do what you say you do, and don't do anything else. But it is really, really complex, isn't it? And I think everybody finds it very, very difficult. I'm a very practical soul. I read the GDPR, and it says write down your processes. Being perfectly honest, that stinks of effort and is very, very difficult. And that's where I have used in anger the OneTrust platform for the data mapping and breaking it all down. So I think I've given quite a high answer in it rather than specifics about a marketing campaign. But at the very high level, you've got to understand the strategy of how all those platforms sit together in your business and be able to prove that you understand it. Probably slightly a general answer, but does that help at all?
Yeah, I suppose it was a bit of a rhetorical question, because I think the stuff that you see from the, you seem to have publishers at one end of the ecosystem and advertisers at the other end of the ecosystem, and this massive businesses in the middle. And I presume it's going to be the publishers and the advertisers who will get it in the neck from the consumer.
I can't give you a detailed answer on that. It's a really complex world, isn't it? What I have seen from the other end of the spectrum is, if you are involved in a data incident and it is your customers or your clients, you suddenly want to know that you can at least evidence how you collected their data and what you did with it. And there is a very complex world that I am not a marketing expert in the world that you guys operate. So probably back to Claire, but what I do know is, if something happens, and I've lived through these types of incidents that impact your business, your clients, your consumers, you need to be able to be as clear as possible as what happened with that data, where you got it from, and what you did to it. And the thing I always think is, we're getting all very used to, sadly, getting these emails from the big companies saying your data's been involved in a data breach, and we get used to that. But the day that you write that letter or that email to your customers, your clients, your employees, is a really bad day. So the more we can try and understand what's happening and control things, the better. And definitely not use data for things that it shouldn't be used for, and delete data when you're asked to delete it. So it's a really complex world.
Can I just, so I fully understand it, we're not seeing any significant changes in the GDPR regulations, that they're staying as they are. Obviously, the major changes is to do with the way in which we market and our ability to build. Yeah. But tell me, when it comes to things like, particularly in B2B, legitimate interest, which is something we've all used as a way, particularly, for example, the outbound communications we do in Pimento. You know, when we're talking to agencies that are part of the network, obviously there's clearly legitimate interest there because they're part of the network and they've actually subscribed to Pimento and we've offered them to be able to access our emails and newsletters. Not a problem. When we're introduced to a new agency or when we use data that we've acquired that is approved to be used, we can continue to use legitimate interest to be able to communicate with them in the B2B world. There seems to be more of a safety net in that environment than the B2C world.
Yes, although I think e-privacy is coming in, that is on the horizon, and that could start to challenge that. But I think in all cases you have got to want to be tenacious to understand more about where data came from and was it fit for purpose, and do your own due diligence around anything that you use. And trust, I mean, trust is the word that's come up today, but trust is everything. But you need businesses now to trust you when they sell you that data to use, or whatever, that it is fit for purpose. You can't, you need to be curious and find out and do your due diligence and check your suppliers and check your sub-processors. And there's going to be more and more pressure on that to be able to prove that you did everything you could to be sure that you acted legally. And every time you use somebody's personal data, just make sure you are confident that you're using it in an appropriate way. And it's like people's data. Somebody said to me, it's like your data, it's like leaving your house keys lying around or your wallet lying around. Personal data is really powerful, and we need to always do the right things. I think it's really hard to get, people just want to get on and sell their products and do their marketing. And it feels like this nuisance that's holding things back. But businesses really need to want to embrace doing the right things, being really ethical with data, always doing the right things when nobody's looking, not only doing the right things when you're asked or challenged. Yes, B2C is obviously front of mind, but B2B is also to be really respected as well. Yes, behind every business contact, there's still a person. So I don't know, again, perhaps a waffly answer, but I don't know if that helps.
It does. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to go, if I may, to Jean. Jean is known to her. Jean, what I'd like to ask, Jean, is obviously the world you come from in terms of marketing automation. To what extent are marketing automation platforms set up for these changes in the way in which we market?
I think the most important thing to remember with most marketing automation platforms is that we primarily deal with first-party cookies. So our data is first-party. If you put rubbish in, then of course rubbish will come out. So if you're buying in data from outside, there is a possibility there that you can unwittingly bring data into your system and into your marketing campaigns that maybe is not as good as it could be. So I think Caroline is absolutely right. When you buy in data, you really need to make sure that whichever third party you're buying it from, that they are adhering to the new rules, the new regulations, that the data hasn't been obtained nefariously, that it's good data, that it's clean data. That's the really important thing. But most good quality marketing systems will actually offer you things like automated unsubscription. So if you actually send out an email or you make some approach to somebody and they don't want it, it offers them as the individual the right to unsubscribe from the system. And most good quality marketing automation systems will never email that person again. It just doesn't happen because the system is set up with that as a filter. We also automate, most of the marketing automation platforms will also automate things like the right to be forgotten and the right to be deleted. And in fact, the only piece of data that a marketing automation platform will hold on to is the request that somebody sends in to be deleted, because obviously we need to offer that as proof that someone's asked to be deleted. Other than that, we will delete all other data that they will have within our systems. So all of those things are automated. But of course, we're coming now into this post-cookie world. And we've got this golden hour where we can start to create first-party data. So if we're not doing it at the moment, this is where we can do things like carry and capture conversational marketing, things like live chat that we have on our websites. Again, a good marketing automation platform will allow you to incorporate that first-party data and grow your list of first-party contacts and prospects. There are other things that you can do, automating contact us forms on your website. So once again, they come straight into your marketing automation platform as first-party data, because in order for somebody to send you a web form, they have to consent for you to contact them afterwards. So these are all ways where, if you're canny now, you will be looking at your marketing strategies in order to make sure that these things happen between now and when third-party cookies are removed. So you've got this golden hour. Change your strategy, look at what you're doing, look at every outreach that you make, and make sure that it results in somebody responding with an approval for you to contact them in the future.
Okay, well, that's very helpful and very clear. And I think, you know, most of the agencies, if they're not already using marketing automation platforms, need to be engaging around those, particularly now if we're not going to be able to actually use cookies to be able to actually track and build interest and build relationships. I guess in summary, for me, what this feels like is that we're really kind of going back to the kind of the basics of marketing, you know, which is actually putting the right information in front of the right person at the right time with full marketing permissions, and ensuring that actually our content and our products are tailored for their requirements. You could almost argue that actually cookies became a lazy way be able to troll and find potential interest. That this requires us now, I think, to be on our game. And some of the tools that we've been shown today obviously will be helpful in making that happen. Trevor, you had a message. I'll read it out, a question, in fact. And it's as a non-digital marketeer, some basic questions, if I may. Will the new law require a change? Sorry, will the new law require a straight and clear opt-in or opt-out within the cookie request? And I think the answer to that one is, as far as I'm aware, it's not a change in the law we're looking at. This is already the status, that there hasn't been any significant change. What there is a change in is that, once again, is the ability to be able to actually share a cookie when someone perhaps comes onto your website and ask them for permission to be able to actually communicate with them and then follow them across the various sites they might be looking at. So that's the big change. There's actually no physical change to the current laws, but there will be, in the fullness of time, updates on GDPR regulations in the UK, which is ironic, isn't it? Because on one hand, we're seeing the government selling all our data off to American multinationals when it comes to our medical accounts, at the same time tightening up on what we're allowed to do when it comes to communications and marketing in the UK. But there you go, a double standard from the UK government. Can you believe it? Thanks, if I may, to our speakers today. Thank you, Claire, for getting up so early and presenting and taking us through that. Really interesting stuff. And also thank you, Caroline, for joining us nearer to home. We will be making this video available. If you have any follow-up questions, do drop me a line. If you're interested in getting to know more about the platform, and likewise, do as I say, drop me an email. You've got my email address. We will see you all again next Thursday. That's not this Thursday, it's Thursday week. And now I'm back to filling out boxes. So have a relaxing day, everybody, and thank you once again. Cheers. Bye-bye.